John Lennon is a failure of a man. Now, before I get into this, because this is going to be a whole series about these failures of men in our society, but I just want to make it clear this is not about picking on John Lennon. It's not about picking on any of these people. It's about our society and the things it values and the people that it chooses to make celebrities of. We live in a society where there's this concept of the great man. It's almost like a cult. The great man who writes catchy songs, or he paints great pictures, or he's a big wealthy industrialist, or he's a politician, or he's a writer, etc., etc. The great man, the great man. And yet, if you look at any of these great men, they're all terrible fathers. They're all terrible parents. Too involved with their own narcissism and their own ego. Equal parts neglectful and abusive. Because it is, in almost all cases, child abuse that drives these great men to become great men. There's so many people that want to make excuses for these great men, and they get in the comments and they argue and they're defending their heroes. Oh, sure, yeah, he had 10 kids and abandoned them all, but he was a great man. Oh, yeah, sure, all his kids have absolutely nothing good to say about him, but he was a great man. This is what's wrong with our society. The concept that you can be a great man and be a terrible father. This is the great plague of child abuse that has spread to every corner of this world. So, getting back to John Lennon, just to give you a little background if you don't know, John Lennon had 2 sons. As you can see, Julian, he had with his first wife. Julian was abandoned by his father when he was 5 and only recently received a share of the vast Lennon estate. Sean is the favored son, ooh, what a privilege, for whom John Lennon became a house husband. Okay, so that's the background. He had 2 kids and he abused them both. Let's look at some of the evidence. First, from Julian. Lennon soon became extremely abusive towards Powell, beating her for any reason he saw fit. Not only that, but Lennon became verbally abusive to his son, Julian, during his infancy as well. His infancy, he was being verbally abusive to an infant. Powell recounted one instance in particular that damaged her son, Julian, heavily in her biography, John. One incident in particular did him lasting damage. The whole family had been having fun, making pancakes and fooling around, when Julian giggled. John turned on him and screamed, "I can't stand the way you effing laugh. Never let me hear your effing horrible laugh again." He continued with a tirade of abuse until Julian fled once again to his room in tears. It was monstrously cruel and has affected him ever since. To this day, he seldom laughs. Just think about that for a minute. Just think about that for a minute. For the crime of a toddler giggling, this lunatic lost his mind and screamed at him and damaged him for life. Because why? He didn't want to see him happy? This is a sick individual that you idolize, some of you. And it makes you very, very upset to have to look at this stuff because he's like a god to you. And you know what they say? Oh, John, he had a lot of stuff to work through, you know. Here comes the great man theory again. John had a tough childhood, and yes, he was cruel, and but you know, as he got older, he mellowed out, and he was a good father to Sean. Well, that's just not possible. That's not how things work. Here's a story about Sean Lennon, the quote-unquote favorite child, the child that he had with Yoko, another narcissistic lunatic. In his own words, Sean Lennon tells how his father flew off the handle and screamed into his ear as a young boy. He was teaching me how to cut and eat steak, which was a mystery to me at age 4. How to stick the fork in and cut behind it. And that's how you got a piece in your mouth, writes Sean. I think it was that night when he got very upset with me. I think because of something I did very cheekily with the steak. He did wind up yelling at me very, very loudly to the point where he damaged my ear and I had to go to the hospital. Screaming at a 4-year-old in their ear to the point where they have to go to the hospital. This is your great man. This is your great man. I submit to you that there is no such thing as a great man who abuses his children. If you abuse your children, it wipes away everything else that you could have possibly accomplished in life. No one forced you to have children. Certainly no one forced you to abuse your children. If you know that you're an angry, mean person and that you're abusive, why even have children? He could have just stuck to doing heroin and killed himself that way instead of bringing children into the world to abuse and make them suffer. Back to Julian. When people come up to him in the street, meaning Julian, blabbing their love for his father because he spoke the truth, quote unquote, they meet with a polite reserve. I have to say that, from my point of view, I felt he was a hypocrite. Dad could talk about peace and love out loud to the world, but he could never show it to the people who supposedly meant the most to him, his wife and son. How can you talk about peace and love and have a family in bits and pieces, no communication, adultery, divorce? You can't do it, not if you're being true and honest with yourself. Isn't that the truth? Again, this reminds me of the priesthood. They get on stage and they talk so beautifully about, love and peace and God and heaven and doing right by your fellow man. And then what do they do behind closed doors? They're child molesters. They're sexual predators. They're greedy. They're avaricious. This has been the priesthood since forever, and John Lennon is one of them. He personifies it, as you can see, saying one thing and doing another. That is religion in a nutshell. I'll repeat it again. Saying one thing and doing the opposite is religion in a nutshell. And make no mistake, the Beatles are a religion. The music industry is a religion. They give you these religious figures who are not what they seem to be. But yes, we still have the people that want to make excuses for them. He was a great man, they say. He wrote very catchy songs. His song moved me. It made me feel something. His song was a lie. He was a lie. He was just an egotistical narcissist who wanted to get the most out of everything. He wanted all the money and everything else that came with it, and the fame, Because why? Because he himself was abused as a child. I'm not overlooking that. This isn't about just kicking John Lennon. The problem is that when you have children, you stop becoming a sympathetic figure. From being an abused child, abandoned by your father, and with a mother who had some issues, a lot of issues apparently, John could be a sympathetic figure. His negative personality traits are a direct result of the abuse and neglect he received as a child. This is the cycle of abuse. This is the Great Plague. And when you talk about the great man theory, the great man religion, you are trying to hide the Great Plague. Because every single one of these great men are terrible fathers. They are spreading the plague. They are not healing it. They are not healers. One more thing in this interview I wanted to point out. Paul once observed that John didn't really know how to be a dad. Does Lennon think it is fair to blame someone for being a poor father? This is Julian Lennon. Does Julian Lennon think it is fair to blame someone for being a poor father? Yes, I do. Can we get past this nonsense that these poor parents aren't to blame? Oh, because my mom and my dad suffered terrible things, they were just doing the best they could, abusing me the same way they were abused. The cycles of abuse do not stop until you confront these things, until you come face to face with your own demons. John Lennon never did that. You can tell by the fact that he became a heroin addict. Heroin is for people that need to hide from their problems, that have so much trauma that the only thing they can do is to numb it out. It's like alcoholism, of which John was also an alcoholic. Is it fair to blame someone for being a poor father? Yes. We are all, he argues, capable of doing what we set out to do. If you bring a child into this world, whether it's planned or an accident, you better make sure you can care for it. You have to be around. You make time. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. It really is. It is that simple. It's called ethics. Ethics is something that is lost in this world. We live in a world where everything has to be relative, the lesser of two evils. Compare one bad thing to a worse thing to make it look good. But in ethics, there is no moral relativity. Ethics are black and white. And there's nothing more black and white than the fact that it's wrong to abuse children. Look at the damage that this man, that so many people worshiped like a god, did to his own children. This is the psychopath that you invite into your homes when you play his records. And you're going to try and sit here and tell me that the Beatles' music made the world a better place? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think there's any music that makes this world a better place. If there is, I haven't seen it. Music just entertains us. It makes us feel good about ourselves with songs by people like John Lennon talking about peace and all the good things that they themselves are not capable of manifesting. It's like a Disney movie with a happy ending, but in the real world there is no happy ending. It's just fake. The false catharsis of mass media. These are your heroes. These are the great men. They are failures. Almost all of them are failures. John Lennon is not the last one that I'm going to talk about. I just came across an article of him and I decided to do him first. But there's plenty more that need to be exposed until it's understood that the cult of the great man is the cult of child abuse and continuing the Great Plague. Thanks for listening.